Success. Is that what we want? What is success? How do we get there? What path do we take? We may have some answers. Is it written down somewhere? In a book? This is Grit 2021, How We Navigate. With us today to discuss the emotional and internal things we should think about in choosing a career is Danielle Merolla from the Center for Prevention and Outreach at Stony Brook University. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jamal.
Always. How does psychology and a person's career path intersect?
That's a large question, and I really think the best way to speak to it is taking it down to its most basic components. There are so many things that influence our paths, right? It's our race, our culture, our ethnicity, our gender. Society has all sorts of ways in which they influence what we think we can do or should be able to do. And this is often going to be incorporated throughout our earliest narratives. And so as it relates to career path, and if we're going to maybe take someone who is of college age moving in that direction, my recommendation is always kind of check in with yourself and where you're at, because I think sometimes we have these ideas of what it should be or what we're allowed to do or can do, and I could tell you from experience as a now 42-year-old white woman that paths change. Oftentimes what we initially think or want can be very different than where we end up, and really comes down to that day-to-day kind of check-in and that ability to say, you know what, this is working for me, or maybe it's not, or it didn't go as I expected, and that ability to say, well, what now, other options, how does this open up other doors, is a really resilient part of this process as we try to find, what comes next for us.
Mm-hmm. What role does a person's culture intersect with their career path?
I think it can be in all sorts of ways. It could be how we are influenced by various systems of what we think we can and should do. It could be how we are influenced by our family system about what our family might want us to do. Sometimes you'll see there's individuals from a certain culture who maybe are primarily in the health system and nursing, or there's a culture or a family relationship as it relates to the military, right? So I think it's important for us to kind of acknowledge and respect those intersectional pieces, but also kind of reflect upon them in a way of, does this fit me? Is this what I want? Is this the path that I want to go down, or am I feeling pressure to go down that path? These are really important questions, because what we might find is we go towards a certain way of being I'm going to be a lawyer. This is what I've been informed I should be doing. This is the best path. Mm-hmm. But when we get there, we might feel dissatisfied. Yeah. And then I think that could have this kind of negative impact where all of a sudden we start questioning ourselves, our sense of ourselves, our ability, when it's really, maybe it's just not a match, right? So that day-to-day kind of reflecting, contact, speaking to others in other areas becomes really important. Did I answer that?
Yeah, I agree. So basically more of what you want to do and what you find interesting in, rather than what you hear other people say what you should do, things like that.
Yeah, like what you enjoy too, what do you feel passion towards? And even if you think, I feel passion in this direction, but I don't know that I can, don't let that get in your way of trying, of looking into it and giving it a try, because I think sometimes, these systems, these various pieces could either get in our way, and then sometimes they could be things that really help push us along and support us in our goals.
Definitely. Who makes the decision as to what are good or bad jobs? Is it society or family?
Well, I think this could be a long discussion. I think ultimately it's that individual. But I think we all know that's not that cut and dry.
Yeah.
And the influence that all these other pieces, family, society, has on really kind of creating that narrative, again, is something that can impact how we see ourself and our sense of self in ways that could be really detrimental. But ultimately, if you are in a position or a role that is kind of nurturing your soul and sort of something that you enjoy or something you feel good about afterwards, or something that you are involved in a meaningful way, it's you really who makes that decision. But it's not always that easy. Mm-hmm. And I think the other piece is there's a difference between sometimes we need to be in a job or work because we need that money. Definitely. And so the job is not necessarily what's fulfilling for us. And that happens often, right? But it's how do we allow that job to fill its role, which is I need this job, I need to make money, I need to support myself and my family, and how do we supply our life in other ways that can be fulfilling and passionate? I think we are also in a culture where we put so much stock in our job, in our career, that sometimes we are not investing in our personal world and life, both within the family, within communities, and there's so much that could be done within those areas that could be really fulfilling and maybe even provide that balance.
Mm-hmm. No one's ever asked, like, do you want to live in an urban or suburban environment when you leave college? Shouldn't that be a consideration in thinking about a career for your future?
I think so. No one ever asked me that either, so that's an interesting question. When I got asked to do this interview, I was kind of thinking about what was my pathway here. How were certain things informed? And I never thought about where I would land necessarily, but I do think that's an interesting question, especially now. We've seen a lot of changes in where people want to live and be after what we've been going through over the past year.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think that's a good question. But the other piece is too, because I landed in different areas and I ended up coming back close to where I grew up because, I had a family and I needed that extra support and community, as a single human being, so that also had great influence. Even though there was places where I had landed where I could have been there forever and I really enjoyed it, I also needed the community.
Okay. Whether or not you think you may want to have a family or married or live alone, shouldn't that be a factor in choosing your career choice?
So for me it was, and I'll tell you why. And I think it's going to differ. I didn't really know about marriage and this and that, where I landed for that. What I did know is that I wanted children. And I wanted a career that at some point would allow me some flexibility to be able to also be
with your children,
with my children. And that's really hard to find. So there was two things that really influenced why I decided to go, not just in the area, because the area in which I chose, which is psychology, clinical psychology, has always been an interest, also relates to kind of family underpinnings and things that I experienced, but the degree that I chose. I did choose to go for my doctorate because, from my understanding at that age, that would allow me more flexibility to possibly kind of step out a little bit, but still be involved. But also, it was important for me to have a seat at the table, if possible, right? That ability to maybe influence, to have a voice in ways that could shift and inform policies and procedures in a manner that could help the larger community. So for me, the family piece, or at least the kid piece, was certainly a factor. And that's why I knew in the field and from kind of conversations I had with people that it would be possible with something like that. Another one, like teachers. I know I have people around me who are like high school teachers, and they have their whole summer off, with their kids. So, and that was certainly a factor. So I think that can be a consideration if those choices are available.
Okay. You mentioned how you wanted to get into something where you could have a flexible time. Are you in that position now?
Not as much as I would like to be. I think, however, I was lucky enough that when I actually had my kids, I was able to take a longer time off. Our system is completely backwards. So in the situations I were in, I would have to step back only for, I don't know, it's like 3 months. And I really wanted a longer period of time, so I was able to, based on my position at the time, to stay home longer with my boys, which I'm really, really grateful for. But I could tell you that to be honest, it had an impact on my trajectory. I would have been in a different place at a different time if I went straight through, but because for me that was really important, taking that step back, and at that time I was able to do so, that was helpful. But I think, again, this is like a different time in my career, my trajectory, that kind of what is required at this time is all-encompassing and does not necessarily allow me the flexibility that I would like.